Welcome to the Custom Automotive Solutions YouTube channel, where passion meets performance and rubber meets the road. From the first turn of the ratchet to the first laps on track, we have you covered. We don't just fix cars, we build them and make sure every vehicle that rolls out of our shop is better than when it rolled in. Join us as we pursue our passion, because here at Custom Automotive Solutions, we don't just follow the road, we attack it. You should like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you. On today's episode, spend the next 13 minutes watching Cody replace these spark plugs on a Subaru. If you know, you know.
This is the spark plugs going into the BRZ.
Grab one out of the junk pile in here. If I can find one. Here's one.
That's like your standard spark plug out of like a Chevy 350. These things are just getting tiny. They even make smaller versions of this. I thought that's what this was, and I didn't think I had the socket for it. Relatively the same as Subaru at this point, because there's varying distances with what you're dealing with outside the engine, because you might have 4 or 5 inches back above the frame rail, and then there's something mounted over here in front of this cylinder, so you don't have that extra room. So sometimes you just use a socket with a wobbly on it. Sometimes it's a socket with a small extension. Sometimes it's a socket with a 3-inch extension. You gotta just kind of grab them all, throw them in your pocket, and mix and match as you go. I'm gonna be switching between them. It's like every time I do a Subaru, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna need this socket with a wobbly and probably a 3-inch extension. And then I'm going back, I'm like, oh, I don't need a socket for the or extension for this one. Oh, I need a little extension for this one. Figure out what size works here. And now that I've got the coils out, I gotta try and get the spark plugs out. So this one is gonna want a little extension. I need just an inch to pop me outside the valve cover, so I can turn my ratchet.
If you ever want to know why the mechanic charges you so much to work on your car, don't blame the mechanic, blame the manufacturer of the car.
In most cases, yes.
You have to then fit the spark plug all the way down there somewhere?
Yes. Subaru spark plugs just generally aren't really quick and easy like most manufacturers because of the orientation of the engine. With Subaru, your top of your cylinders face the frame rails instead of facing up like most other engines. On most engines where they're typically accessible, just right on top of the valve cover, maybe you take part of the intake piping off. These ones are down on the side of the engine facing the frame rail, which just makes it a little more of a pain to access for removal. I know these engines were used in airplanes. It's the design is referred to as a boxer engine. Porsche uses them too, where it's a flat engine. The pistons lay parallel to the ground instead of facing upwards or in a V formation. And I'm sure there's advantages to running them that way. I just don't personally know all the ins and outs of them. All right, so that's broken loose. I don't like ripping spark plugs out with power tools. I know some guys will just throw Milwaukee on there or something, but I'd rather not take the chance of galling up the threads coming out too fast or it hangs up on something. I like to just pop them loose and take them out by hand. Guarantees there's no issues going back in, especially when you can't even see where you're sticking it on these motors.
If you do take a tool to it, is there like a chance that you might strip something?
When you're backing out a bolt or any threaded piece, spinning it out quickly, there's always a chance that something will get caught in the threads or the thread will misalign. Something could happen. The chance is low, but when you work in this industry for a long time, it's those little things that kind of set you apart, because even though the chance is low, if you just never take that chance, it's never going to happen. And you won't be that guy that, you know, oh, this happened a couple times to me in my career, you just avoided it altogether. And it's not guaranteed going to happen, but for a technician, if anything goes wrong, it kind of falls back on you, even if it wasn't your fault. I've had to do jobs for free again, just because we got the bad parts sent to us from the manufacturer, but I wasn't getting paid to do that job over, and it wasn't my fault. So I call it CYA. Cover your ass. There's one of them. Yeah, that guy's definitely a little dirty there.
It looks almost toast to me.
The gaps are okay, but he's definitely fouled. This guy's pushing a lot of fuel, so it's probably just overfueling and cold start and idle. Wouldn't surprise me. One plug down. Let's see how this looks for the front one.
Is this another one spark plug for each cylinder?
Yep, one spark plug, one coil per cylinder. All right, we're in. Swap ratchets real fast. Wobbly head kind of fought me on the last one. Go get the non-flexible ratchet. Come on. There we go. Yeah, this is, like I said, I picked the shitty one first because the rest of it will just be me working for the most part.
That's fair.
Oh, come on now. I really wish I didn't have to work around this ECU, and I probably could take it off. But I don't know exactly what it goes to, and I don't want to have to reset a bunch of stuff and clear weird codes Dude, this spark plug is just, there we go. It just doesn't want to turn.
I like how the most difficult part of working on this entire thing is the spark plug so far.
That's usually like the easy beginner entry level job on your car. Do your spark plugs. It's easy. Takes 30 minutes.
Finally. Got.
Finally. Yeah, magnetic plug sockets come in really handy on these guys.
All right, let's get these spark plugs back in.
So this is just maintenance on the track car, right? So just you're gonna replace this. You're replacing the spark plugs right now.
Yes.
Then you're gonna change the oil. What's anything else that kind of is involved in this?
Well, we're also going to drain and fill the trans, just so that's got fresh oil in it, and the rear diff. And then he wanted some brake work done, fresh brakes, and then all clean fluid. So we'll flush the whole brake system out and get all the fluid replaced. And then some suspension components in the front end, get them ready for the track. Man, this ECU is really not helping. I like magnetic plug sockets so much for doing this type of stuff. New coils, now they got the plugs in. Go ahead and get the coils wiggled back in there.
Most of the time it's just figuring out what extensions you need and how to get at it. And then once you got that, it's go, go, go.
Okay.
How difficult is it to get one of these guys in?
Coils. Not bad. Once I've got it up like this, and I don't have to fight a connector or bolt or anything on these, so it's just slipping them in. Putting the bolts back in and tightening them down will be a little tight, but it won't be too bad. These coils are a little smaller.
An interesting way to capture this.
Yeah, there's not. Unless I take the motor out for these.
But how much time would that actually save you?
None, it'd be way longer. I'd spend more time just getting this motor out, just getting it ready to come out, like hooking the cherry picker up to it and having it actually ready to come out of the car. Not even the time required to pull it out. I'd already be over on time.
Better off just digging in the engine.
Yeah.
So I've got the bolt into the coil, but I can't feel where the hole is. It could be further back, forward, because this is just on the plug, so it'll move around. Might be able to finagle something. Get that started. BMW tools.
So they shops charge for a brake flush, but they get a bleed. What's a bleed?
So, and it's not the shop doing it intentionally, it's usually the technicians. So like a bleed would be if we replace some of your brake parts and say we replaced a caliper. So then there's going to be air in the system because we had to unhook that brake line to put a new caliper on. So then we would bleed the air out of the system so that there's no longer any air in the system, just fluid. So you don't lose any hydraulic pressure. And a lot of guys, when they do a brake flush, they'll suck this down, your brake fluid reservoir. This one's wrapped for heat, but this is just full of brake fluid. And they would suck this down, put new fluid in it, and then go bleed the brakes really quick and be like, okay, it's done. But this holds 10 to 12 ounces, sometimes 16 on other models. And you have all the fluid that's in the lines, all the way back, forward, the fluid in the calipers. So if you're flushing a brake system, you should at least push 32 ounces of fluid through it, all the corners, so that you know that you're just pushing all the dirty fluid out. And a lot of guys, that's where the flat rate thing comes in. They'll be like, oh, I got a brake flush, and they'll just suck it out, fill it up, do a brake bleed, good enough, and it's like a 60% or maybe a 70% brake flush.
Whereas you're typically looking for 100.
Yeah, and a lot of customers, they're not going to notice. Their brakes feel way better than they did before. They don't typically care about the water content in your brake fluid, your average customer. So water in a brake system will compress just like brake fluid. So you're not going to notice any performance difference, but it'll rust your calipers and it can rust your master cylinder, and that can lead to other braking issues like your brakes not working correctly or your brakes sticking and staying on. So this being a track car, something that regularly races and works its brakes and suspension, that's why he wanted the thing completely flush for all clean brake fluid, fresh brakes. So that's what we're gonna do. Run the harnesses back over. And that is that side done for spark plugs. Finery. Now I'm gonna switch sides. I'll live a little dangerously. That hood's not that heavy. I've been eaten by worse cars.
It's not a fun feeling when you're like this and a 40-pound hood comes down on you.
Usually you're really mad because something really hard just hit you in the head out of nowhere, and then you're like, motherfucker, when you realize what it was.
Sometimes all you can do is blame yourself.
Yeah, sometimes that is true. Hopefully this side goes a little faster. Just for anybody watching at home, the passenger side is the not fun side on this one. You have all the normal stuff in your way, plus a heat shield for the injector assembly on that side, and an ECU right where you don't want it. This side's got a little more room in here, so hopefully it goes a little faster. Might have to feed this in without the wrench first. Flex head ratchets are nice when you're out of position, like over there, having to work around that ECU. But with none of that stuff over here, it's going to be a lot easier using a solid head ratchet. And given how far down in the engine compartment I'm working, line up the head to where the extension's at. There we go. Now I'm going to pull the driver's side spark plugs out. Having a universal on here allows me to get a little extra throw. Might be able to take them out by hand now. Alright. Driver's side rear plug, just as nasty as the other ones. Now, this thing is definitely thirsty. Now, we were looking at it for a starting issue initially. It just had some blocker codes in there that was actually inhibiting the vehicle from starting. There wasn't anything actually wrong with it as far as I could tell. Seems like it just had a small hiccup at some point and said, no, I'm good. But when we were diagging it, it came in with a quarter tank of fuel. Started it 4 or 5 times after I got it figured out. Let it idle for 10-15 minutes, relearn idle, and shut it off. And then the next day I came in, the tank was pretty much on E. So a quarter tank of fuel for 4 starts and a 15-minute idle. This thing's thirsty. On any other vehicle, that would be a problem, but that's how we want it on this one.
Why is that?
On any other regular vehicle, like your daily driver or something, that would be a big issue for the engine. You'd be overfueling majorly. You'd be fouling spark plugs out like this really fast. Your fuel mileage would be in the dumpster. Cold start runability would be poop. So first firing your car up in the morning when it's cold, the first 5-10 minutes of it being cold, it's just going to not run well. It's going to idle high, it might fluctuate a little bit, and it's just all that extra fuel. But those factory computers also aren't set up for that. They don't know how to regulate that much fuel. If you were dumping that much, they would be throwing code saying, hey, I can't adjust my fuel, it's way too much. But this guy's got programming and tuning to compensate. So it's happy where it is. It's just, change spark plugs a little more often because race car.
Because broom broom.
Exactly. That was one of the house sayings back when I was in high school working on cars with my buddies. Why are you doing that? Because race car. There's the last one. You plug in the socket. Let's get him back in his home.
The last spark plug.
Last spark plug.
After what? Almost 3 hours?
Almost 3 hours, yeah. I mean, some of that was me planning, but yeah, this job is not an easy one. I can't say I've ever done this on a BRZ, but I've done this on plenty of Subarus. Probably 70-80% the same, other than your outside peripherals. And I've definitely been doing this, working on cars for over a decade. I'm not the fastest guy out there, but I'm no slouch. So definitely don't go into this job thinking, oh yeah, it'll just be an afternoon. I mean, it will be an afternoon, but it could be into the evening as well if you're not prepared for it.
Could be a hell of an afternoon if you don't do it right.
Yeah, and this is done per the book with, knock on wood, no fuck up so far. As soon as you have an issue, that's where you start losing time real fast. I got a crush washer on those guys, so they'll get kind of tight, and then it'll get kind of loose again. And that's normal because they've got a washer on the threaded portion of the spark plug that is designed to crush and seal around that spark plug when it's installed. And the fun part, especially when you're out of position and you only got a few angles of movement, is figuring out, did I hit my crush seal yet? Is the spark plug already tight? They're usually 180 to 90 degrees past snug, crushes the seal fully. And you should be able to feel it get more resistance as you go. But when you only have a couple degrees of angle, kind of hard to differentiate sometimes. There we go. Because it's really easy to strip out an aluminum head with a spark plug.
Last 2 coils.
Last 2.
It'd give you a better angle, but I can't see jack shit.
I can get my hand out of here and you can kind of see easier now that they're blue. Yeah. There's the coils down in there.
Yep, there's a blue thing down there.
And keep in mind, you only have that much room after you unbolt the exhaust and the motor mounts and jack the engine up about 3 to 4 inches. They're way more buried than that when you start. And we're back down sitting in the cradle. We just did the spark plugs and coils. That's all we did. I had to unbolt the motor mounts and the exhaust and some of the intercooler piping to get the motor to lift up about 4 inches so we can get at the coils because they're lined up with the frame rails. Gained just enough room to get the coils out, and then swapped out the plugs, put new coils in there, and got them all hooked back up. Finally got them set back down after 3 hours. Yay, Subaru!
All this work to get to these little flipping blue guys. Good job, Cody. And then we'll come back and do some fluid stuff, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta put the nuts back on the motor mounts and stuff, but yeah. Because that's stuff that I like to forget. Because you don't need them right now. The motor's not gonna go anywhere. You just like finish it all up and you're like, there's these 2 nuts sitting on my cow. Oh, motor mount! Well, good thing I didn't fire it off. Whew. This motor mount's not wanting to sit down. Gotta address things like that when I see it. And have that steering wheel one spline off, and then your steering wheel will be crooked. Why is there anti-seize all over there?